Yeah,
Yeah, we are pregnant. We're having a baby.
the new healthcare law couldn't have come at a better time.
Yeah, because when you're pregnant, you need a lot of doctors.
For less than 30 a month, the whole family's covered.
New law, lower prices, more people qualify at healthcare.gov.
Good evening, community. I'd like to call this session to order. Ms. Williams, would you take roll?
Ms. Sanye,
Present.
Ms. Cousins,
Present.
Ms. Fowler,
I'm here.
Ms. Vowell, Mr. Davis,
Present.
Ms. Jones, Dr. Roberts.
Present.
We have a quorum.
May we stand for the pledge of allegiance, please?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Dr. Adams, ESSER update.
First of all, good afternoon to the public. I'd like to give the board and the public an update relative to the emergency and secondary school emergency relief, which is called ESSER 2. The agenda basically will cover background, ESSER background, expenditures, district allocation, school allocation methodology, where we now in measuring impact, and obviously take any questions. The Just a brief background. We've had several presentations on this, so I won't belabor the information that's here. But basically making you aware that the board has received in the first iteration $10.6 million, which is called ESSER 1 or referred to as CARES, ESSER 2, $46 million, and then 51 million times 2, if you will, which is 103 for ESSER 3. We broke it up into 2 years for 2002 and 2003, and 2003, 2004. In terms of expenditures for ESSER 1, because the question came through the media relative to how dollars have already been spent, you can see that most of the dollars in this iteration was used for cleaning and sanitizing schools, purchasing educational technology, and providing training to educators on technology. Obviously, these dollars were the first dollars that we received right after the pandemic or right during the pandemic in 2020. And all of these dollars have been expended in the categories that you see here. In terms of ESSER $2, the layout here is about $46 million with about 4%, which is considered an indirect rate, leaving about $44 million. Schools are receiving about the bulk of those dollars, about 55%. This was consistent with the survey information that we received when we surveyed over 3,000 persons relative to how we thought best to use the dollars. Academic department, about $4 million or 10%. Student support, about $2.2 million, 5%. Operations, about $11 million, 25%. And then technology and assessments, about $2.2 million. In terms of the methodology that was used, first and foremost, the school ranges, the school allocations range from about $78,000 to $78,000 to $1.3 million, what the allocations would be. The breakdown would be $875 for students. Students who identified in free reduced lunch would be $263. IEP students 438, students in transition 438, and EL students are 438 as well. And that's how we came up with the amount per school. So where are we now? Schools are planning for implementation, and in doing so, schools have received the allocations on November 10th. We actually told them how much they were receiving. The school leadership teams have attended ESSA planning meetings. The schools are leading ESSA 2 planning sessions as well with parents, staff, and the community. Principals reached out to vendors and other partners for quotes, and schools are submitting finalized plans that are due on December the 15th. Network superintendents have to sign them, parents have to sign them, at least the PTO president or parent designee, as well as the a member of the local union 420, if they have a building rep, would need to sign as well. What I like to do in your packet on your table, you have an example of an actual plan. So that plan is from Nance Elementary School. If you could take that plan out, I'd like to walk you through it just for a second, because I think it's important for you to actually see. You have 3 documents. You have a large document that looks like this, that you can unfold. You have a secondary document that has Nance Elementary ESSA 2 plan on it, and then you have an ESSA addendum to the accountability plan. I'll go over that one first. The ESSA 2 addendum to the accountability plan lays out what the budget amount is, what the resources are, the directions that were provided, the school goals that you see on page 1. You also see the information in terms of how schools are going to implement it, and based on accountability plan. You see what the progress monitoring data is in terms of what they will attempt to achieve as a result of these dollars. The growth for math, science, the equity index that they're using in terms of FRL, IEP students, students in transition, and ELL students in terms of how the dollars were actually allocated. You also see decision level data in terms of how are you making sure the funds are impacting students. They ask some key questions here, additional revised SMART goals that you see for reading, math, and teacher retention. The next page lays out action step 1, action step 2, action step 3, with evidence of impact, progress monitoring students that will be impacted, and a targeted student group as well. So this document lays out exactly everything that the school is going to be doing from an academic perspective. And so I want to share that document with you so that the board can see it. If you look to the last page, you actually see the signatures of the persons who actually signed the document. Principal, network superintendent's name is not on here, but teacher, but the actual signatures will be here, as well as student representatives at the upper elementary level, since this is an elementary school. The second document I'd like to walk you through, and you can walk through all of it, the idea was to give you some idea, is the Nance Elementary ESSA 2 plan that says November 2020. Is a draft because it's not due until the 50th. We asked for a copy early for this particular school that was deep in the weeds in terms of doing it. The transforming the future of the community, the strategic plan document. Then you see the priorities and action steps again. Priorities and action steps again on page 4. And that continues all the way through till you see the questions and answers about ESSA 2 that they try to address and answer from the overview. This is a repeat of some of the same information that was in the other document, but it's in the PowerPoint. The action steps in terms of the action 1, collaborative learning environments, is what they're looking to do, and spending $86,000 in that space. And you can see some of the kinds of things that they're looking to purchase. You can look at the pre-K classroom redesign of the equipment that they're going to actually be purchasing, and the kindergarten, second grade replacement furniture, because dollars can be spent in that space as well. The outdoor classroom space as well. What you see are STEAM lab they're looking to purchase as well as do some outdoor classroom overview. These are all items that they're using their dollars to cover. That's in this document that parents have seen, that faculty has seen and looked at as well. The last document, I'm giving these for you to take to look at if you have further questions. Don't want to belabor you with the entire document. It's the big sheet that says draft is actually the budget. And the budget is broken down by action 1, action 2, action 3, and what the costs are for all of the items that are listed here. And this is the document that will be put into one document as we order supplies and materials throughout the entire district for what we might need from these particular companies. So I'm actually not only giving you a PowerPoint presentation about a big overview, but actually letting you see exactly one plan from one particular elementary school. And this school is receiving about $395,000, as you can see. Questions that the board might have relative to this process that we put in place. All schools are doing the same thing. December 15 is when this document is done, is due for all schools. And then we'll start the ordering process by making sure that if somebody else is ordering from specialty, we'll send out an RFP specific to what everybody is ordering from all schools, such that we can get a better price, as you can tell. So questions that the board might have.
Oh, just a couple of questions. The accountability plan, is that accountability plan for the school itself, for them to keep themselves on track, or is that something that they report to the district to show the progress?
Both.
Both, okay.
Obviously, it's the data that they're looking at, but it's also data that we'll be looking at and calling them in to look at.
Okay.
Again, as I said before, the challenge regarding all of this is going to be getting those materials in before the end of the school year, and it's likely that all of them won't. So this will be a 2-year process as we're going to do that. So these goals originally written for right now will likely not be goals until we look at a year from now.
And the other question I have is, are schools doing similar things, and are each school determining what they need to focus on and then using the money based on what they're focused on? And my other question with that is that if there are things that, if they're doing different things and we as a district find them to be very successful, is there any way to transfer that knowledge to other schools?
I think that's an excellent question. The first part of the question is, schools are working in their network, so there's some collaboration going on. Elementary schools are looking at the same kinds of things. This particular school is doing a deep dive around furniture. Other schools may not need to do a deep dive around furniture because that's not an issue for them. That's the first part of the question. There is some collaboration going on. Network superintendents are having conversations. So there's a lot of synergy going on from networks or from schools to schools because they're talking on a regular basis. Elementary, middle, and high schools are also doing that same conversation around grade levels. In terms of best practices, is really what the question is about. It is likely that we will be looking at this after the fact, not through the process, because we won't actually get anything back until a year from now. So with the ESSA $3, it could be that we are replicating some of these kinds of best practices with the third iteration of dollars that we will be getting. While we've gotten a tentative approval from the state regarding ESSA $3, we can make adjustments throughout the process, since those are dollars that are likely not going to be leveraged, quite frankly, to maybe January 2023, because we're still in the throes of spending these dollars before we even get to the next set of dollars that we're going to receive. So to answer your question is yes, but it won't be immediate, Ms. Fowler. It won't likely take place until a year from now. Yes, ma'am.
I guess I'm just curious about, and maybe I'm just missing it, like, okay, if you get art and music materials, or like I see a school is doing a STEM lab room, how are we keeping track of what they do and monitoring the outcomes so that we have some clear data on like the ways that students improve, or if they're able to be more well? Like, do we have some process to account for the outcomes of what the money is being spent on?
So in the plan itself, they have clear goals. And so we're monitoring those goals based upon how these dollars are being spent. Example, in reading, end of year STAR assessment will show that 50% of students in grades 2 and 3 are reading at above grade level. That would be a way of measuring if these products that they purchase and additional tutoring and other things supported that growth.
And you'll be able to just bring us back the data comparative to where they are.
That is correct. We'll be monitoring the data, they'll be monitoring the data, and there's a level of accountability around where they are, yes. Again, I want to be careful here because it is likely that this won't be until 2023 because they don't even have the materials right now. We're halfway through the school year. So it likely won't impact this school year, likely will impact the beginning of sometime during the next school year once the materials come in. Yes, ma'am, Dr. Roberts.
I'd like to begin by commending the Nance team on the preparation of this document. I could see some thought and energy went into it. My follow-up question is, the central office had to submit a plan to the state for approval. Did we get approval back before we asked the building people to develop a plan?
So ESSA 1 and 2, a plan was not required. ESSA 3, a plan is required. We turned that plan in, you looked at it, approved it, and the state has given us tentative approval.
And
The-
so it was with that approval that the building level leadership was tasked to complete their plan?
So ESSA 1 and 2 did not require a state approval. These are ESSA $2.
Okay.
So ESSA
Okay.
$3, the
Okay.
state had to give a firm approval. It gave it was a different funding that happened in ESSA 1 and 2 than ESSA 3. And so the feds are basically looking at ESSA 3 as opposed to 1 and 2. We still have to turn in something to the state, but it was basically reimbursable dollars based upon what we put in place.
Okay, so that I'm clear and the board is clear.
The
This
answer is
ESSA
yes.
$1 and $2.
Yes,
here.
ma'am.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. This is
And
really ESSA
our
2.
plan as a district was approved.
Our
one
plan
and
for
two.
ESSA 3 is tentatively
Oh,
approved.
Okay.
ESSA $2 did not need the same kind of approval from the state.
Okay. Okay. My next question is around the budget. We know that there are some challenges in getting supplies, and so this is not a use or lose your money.
That is correct.
Okay, the money will be carried over.
That is correct.
Okay.
Carried over in the sense that we have 2 years to spend the dollars. And so we're just in year 1 right now.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. I'll move to the next. From the board relative to, I'm going to spend a little time. I spent some substantial time today with the parties who are responsible for the Learn and Earn program, and I'd like to walk the board through what I learned and what I feel comfortable recommending to the board. First and foremost, the Learn and Earn program, want to give you an update where we are in this particular program. The numbers here represent that you receive, says 368. That number should be 423 as of today. This was a number from last week. Seniors registered in the first 3 weeks of registration, and it's the first 4 weeks of registration. There are 208 as opposed to 172 out of 309 CTE seniors. And there are 215 CTE seniors who are registered at this point in time in the program. So the total eligible CET seniors are 546, the total eligible non-CET seniors are 492. And the program is going to be capped at 600 during the pilot year. And a potential increase will be presented with year 2. One of the big concerns that I think might be a real concern for the board is there a level of capacity to get this done? After meeting with the STL group today, I feel comfortable that they have the capacity and the infrastructure in place to address the management of the students. It should be noted that in consultation, or they have a subcontract with Merge Goodwill and Urban League and an educational data system that really is driving this particular effort. And they have done this work before since 2013, as it relates to what you see before you. The current plan is to meet registration goals of 600. Daily registration updates are taking place. CTE instructors who are already responsible right now for finding placements for students will continue to do that effort, although there's been some collaboration between STL youth jobs and the district in terms of that. Many of our persons who do CTE work have kind of walked away because of the pandemic. And so we're in collaboration with them, working to make sure that they're assisting us in terms of that, the placement of CTE students, but we feel comfortable that all 300 students will be placed. Senior registration sessions for eligible students at high schools, additional support for Nottingham students in VOCAD program, site visits, registrations also supported by Dr. Henning, who is basically managing this particular product. One of the things, concerns that the board had, and I kind of want to address it. The board accepted the $1.6 million from the city of St. Louis, and I kind of want to say where those dollars are going to be going. We were paying students $11.15. With these dollars, we'll be able to increase that amount to $12 an hour as opposed to $11.15, which will increase their amount to $2,160. The CTE students were only going to get a stipend of $900 with the 1.6 that the district put on the table. But with the additional 1.6, those students also will get $2,160. In terms of the CTE students, those students were not necessarily participating in job readiness. These dollars will also assist us in terms of making sure that these students get a baseline job readiness. While their teachers already do that already, if I want to walk away from the fact that teachers are doing that in the fall semester with these students, this is an additional support with these students as well. And so the previous agreement that was that students will get a pay card, these students will actually be getting the same amount of money that the students who are non-CTE students are receiving. Diversity, equity, and inclusion training and trauma-informed training will also be available for the intern site coordinators, which wasn't going to be in place before, and job placement coordination, site recruitment, and payroll services for the 300 CTE students will be covered as well before they were getting a stipend, and it's going to be covered. So overall, the cost of receiving the dollars from the city will assist us in terms of increasing pay for students and also, well, increasing pay for all of the students because the CTE students were not going to get the same amount of money as the students who were going to be part of the pilot that we're putting in place. A breakdown on the current budget from the 1.6 and the additional funds, about $760,000 for the city funds were going to be used to cover the things that you see here. Won't go over all of it with you, but you can see what the additional dollars were coming to cover this additional work that's going to be taking place. And lastly, a breakdown in terms of the budget. Youth wages are money for youth salaries, job coach salaries for Mills Goodwill, operational costs, the salaries for 5 employees, 2 additional to staff the marketing and HR, subcontractor salaries for Mills Goodwill, Urban League and EDS, and indirect administrative costs to do the checks and those kinds of things. One of the big pieces here that I just kind of want the board, remind the board of, these entities take the liability for this effort, not the district. The district was doing it, we will be taking the liability. And so the liability is shifted. And in the initial dollars it was as well, but I just kind of reframe that piece. We frankly don't have the staff right now to do this, even if it's something that I wanted to do. And I'm not saying I want to or not want to, but at this point in time, we would not have the capacity to do so. We've had a lot of robust conversations around what our limitations are around just getting teachers in classrooms and support staff. So this is an effort that I think is aptly being supported by outside entity at this point in time. One big piece I want to also frame is that only about $765,000 are being spent. About $877,000 is yet to be determined. And so the hope and belief is that this 877 could be used at the end of this program in another way to support kids that's outside of this effort. The city has made a commitment for the 1.6. We're only using about 765,000. The other piece that I want to add as well is that part of a commitment that I'm receiving from St. Louis Youth Jobs is that this is a program that takes kids through February, March, and April. A commitment is being made that we will also try to support students past that point in time through May, June, July, and August. That's one of the interests, that's an interest that the city has, but also an interest that we have as well. In a conversation with Mrs. Van Roy today, we get a certain number of points for what is called graduate follow-up. 180 days after kids graduate, we have to look at 4 categories to determine where students are. Jobs, college, whether that's a 2 and 4 year, or military. Last year, our numbers went down, significantly went down, because kids were not engaged in the way that they would normally be engaged. Not that we weren't tracking students, because we were tracking them, but many students, and at the next board meeting, or maybe the January meeting, I'll give the board an update around the 180-day follow-up, but it was a 10% decrease in terms of what students were doing once they graduated from us. We believe this effort could assist in that, obviously not solve it in and of itself, but especially with the job placements that likely are going to continue past 180 days with students. So I just kind of want to frame that. That's a new piece of data that I learned today in my deep dive around this conversation. Again, I know the board has some questions regarding it. I clearly understand it. Lastly, if we do not move in this direction, the $1.6 million that we receive from the city, we would have to go back and negotiate with them again. And if we have to put out another RFP, which we would have to do, we would have to put out another RFP. We just can't spend the dollars in the way that we wanted to. We would have to put out another RFP to move in another direction around this. Based on my deep dive today, meeting personally with the persons from STLU Jobs, I feel confident that that this can be done. I know that, again, I know that there's some concerns, and I had some as well prior to my conversation today. But again, this is a pilot. We will evaluate it at the end of the school year and then come back to the board if we need to make any changes in terms of us being able to do this ourselves. So I'll take any questions that the board might have at this point in time.
Dr. Adams, if we extend this through the summer months, which I hope that we can do, will our partners be on board for that time as well?
Right now, the commitment is only through the current RFP that we put out.
Okay,
We could extend it. We
Okay.
could go out for another RFP. We decided to do so. That we will evaluate this on a weekly basis, quite frankly, to see where kids are. I am positive that we won't spend all of the money in the budget because the truth of the matter is nobody goes to work every single day for the entire period of time. And I can imagine kids are going to have difficulty getting to locations and all of those kinds of things. And they're being paid for actually being there. The $2,100 is assuming that the kids go every single day for February, March, and April. And so I think there'll be dollars left over, even at our 1.6 million that we put on the table, that likely extend that. And after bringing some data back to the board, we'll have to make some determination. But they will be available at this point in time if we try to leverage them.
also I wanted to ask you about the financial literacy piece. That's going to be available to the CTE students as well as the other students, right?
Yes, ma'am. That is
And
correct.
also, who's providing that particular piece of the program?
It is my understanding that Mayor's Goodwill, as well as Mayor's Goodwill, as well as the Urban League and STL Youth are providing that information. Students are going to get that deep dive in January.
Okay,
The CTE students are getting it right now. They're already in those classes. They're already setting up checking accounts. Our teachers are doing that already with those students because they are supposed to go on jobs in January. Historically, they don't get paid for these jobs. They get credit, but they don't
Yeah.
get paid for those jobs.
Right.
For the first time, they'll get paid to actually be in the internship program.
Okay, thank you.
Surely, I have questions.
Yes, ma'am.
My first question is she was asking, Ms. Fowler was asking in regards to the financial literacy, but who's providing the trauma informed training? I saw you had this added in there.
I don't have an exact person. I could let you know who that is.
But I'm saying is that,
They're going to be providing. We won't be providing.
that's going to be a part of
Yes, ma'am.
STLU?
Yes, ma'am.
And then the other question that I have, you're basically saying that it's looking like STLU will be subcontracting some of this with Urban League.
They're already doing it.
And Merv's Goodwill.
Yes, they're already doing it. Because to your point, they don't have the capacity to do it, and they have always used those two entities to support the work in terms of case managers, if you will, who are supporting kids as they're on these jobs, and also taking a liability for insurance as well.
Okay, and when you're saying that we're looking at May to August, and I know the question you were asking, Ms. Fowler, also is hoping that it can go in through the summer months or things of that nature. To my understanding, STL Youth already kind of has something like that set in place, or are we saying we're looking to the hopes to continue to have slots for our students added on to
Yes,
what they're doing?
that is correct. That is correct.
Okay.
Any other questions? I'm sorry. Yes, sir.
Just so I understand the CTE component. So those would be students. So let's say there's some students in the aviation program at Gateway, culinary program at Clyde C. Miller.
Yes, sir.
And then the collegiate and their biomedical. So those would be all CT people who had signed up to be in that program at the beginning of the year.
They're already in CTE classes. In the first half of the year, they're getting the classwork. In January, in all of these CTE classes in their senior year, we had to find them places to go. to get a job-like experience. Classy Mill is a prime example. Every senior that happens, and the teachers are actually following up on them on Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday, but they're gone starting in January. So yes, now those students will be in those internship programs, but they will be getting paid to be in those programs. Historically, they have not gotten paid.
And my one question is, then I guess what was not in the initial agreement is additional money from the city money for job placement, site recruitment, and payroll services for the CTE.
That is
interns.
correct.
So are they helping find internships for those people that were already in the programs that we normally would be able to get internships for?
So what I found out earlier today is that the answer, well, the simple answer is our teachers are already doing that, but some of the CTE slots have dried up as a result of the pandemic. So what's happening is they're working together with our staff. In some cases, they're getting CTE positions. In some cases, our staff is getting some of the other kind of jobs that are non-CTE. So it's a collaboration that's taking place. They meet every Monday for an hour and 2 hours to go over every single partnership. The board requested a list of those businesses that I provided at the last meeting. I also have another copy here for you as well. So the long and short of it is about 90% of the jobs are being found by our staff, meaning persons who are in schools doing that. About 10% are also being found by STL Youth to assist as well.
So there's a shortfall for the number of students who need those internship placements.
Yes, sir.
And that was not anticipated at the initial.
That's
agreement.
correct.
We discovered that, and so that's an additional
So
cost.
support that is not a cost, additional support that they are doing. It's correct.
Well, addition to the budget, so we're giving additional money from the original agreement to fill in that 10% gap.
No, I want to be clear. It's not. It is my understanding, and I want to be clear, that they are assisting us, but it's part of the initial 1.6 million. They weren't initially going to do that, but at the same time, I want to be clear, we are also finding jobs for those students who were non-CTE students. An example would be, at this point in time, we have shortages of staff in our school. Some of these students will be working in schools as part of their internship. So the district is also supporting finding places for kids to get a job experience that wasn't necessarily part of the conversation for the non-CTE students. You follow where I'm going?
I do.
Okay.
I do. I'm just trying to understand, I guess. I'm trying to understand, I guess, fully what the additional money is going for, in addition to the wage increase.
Oh, I hear what you're saying.
Additional sites. It's for additional job coaches then?
Participation in job readiness training, financial bank account setup, and direct deposit setup. Number 3, it's also for hiring additional coaches to support those students in the CTE space.
Okay. So
number five
additional
is part of it.
Okay.
I apologize. Job placement coordination, site recruitment, and payroll services for 300 students. So you are correct in terms of that piece. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, sir.
And then I don't understand the terminology. So intern site coordinators, are those the employers? Are those, so that's on number 4. Are those the employers or are those STL Youth Jobs people?
Dr. Henning?
Okay.
Employees is what he indicated.
So we're going to provide training for the employers to work with our kids. And that's something that was identified that they need DEI and trauma-informed training. Is that something they requested? Is that something we've identified? I'm curious.
Dr. Henning, I'll let you come in and address that.
So that was something we kind of recognized would potentially be an issue with some of the internship sites. And we wanted to make sure we had that support in place. It's not required, but if they request it, we wanted to have it in place so we could provide it right away.
And the partners are going to perform that, or is that something internally?
So that would be, right now, we are in conversations with Alive and Well.
Okay.
To provide that service. And some of that was based on STL Youth Jobs, some of their experiences in the past that they said, hey, you may want to be aware this could be an issue, and we wanted to address that and have it ready.
Okay, that's good to know. And I think that's my final question. So in many circumstances, I assume these students are going to provide valuable work to these employers that they otherwise would be paying someone who's not a student to perform.
Well, that's a really excellent question.
Because I'm saying,
I
because
hear
I
what you're
asked
saying.
that initially and the
Yeah.
answer was yes. And as
Um,
I'm reading these changes, I'm suspicious that that may not be the case.
So that's a really excellent question and one I kind of asked today earlier. I think this is really about giving our kids an opportunity. I think in the past, from my understanding, from our conversation today, employees, a few employees will open up jobs for kids in this space, but we're asking them to take on a responsibility that they otherwise would not take on. So while they may be performing and doing some work that they would not, that they would have a need for, they also are providing a service for our kids in a real tangible way. So I think that's a really interesting question. I don't know that I actually have an answer. Maybe.
Can I just, Dr. Adams, can I just talk about my experience
Yeah.
working with 3 CTE students in the past at my employer
Mhm.
and 1 SLJ student? One, I want to say that the giving some guidance to the employer is absolutely necessary because it is sometimes confusing working with the students. But I think most employers, if they're going to take on the time to have one of those students there, there's a real commitment to do something for that student because it is more trying for the employer to take on the student and take away from their schedule and their staff schedule to work with that student. So when we had the CTE student and the SLJ student didn't quite work out for us, but the CTE students, we didn't have a lot of work, but what we did is we introduced them and we had all students from Clyde C. Miller, all computer related students. We actually developed a program for those students to help them understand what the computer industry was really like. So we gave them assignments to help them understand. And while we couldn't give them work, especially the programming students, because we couldn't teach them the languages, we did provide very valuable and constructive assignments for them and things to do. I think that most employers aren't going to take on something like this because it's time consuming for them to participate in the program. So they want to make it very helpful and informative for the students. So, but the training is necessary so they can understand how to reach that student properly.
So I guess on a case-by-case basis, Mr. Davis, it will be determined in terms of somebody having somebody and getting an advantage by having somebody there, or it's the experience that Ms. Fowler had, which is them giving up a lot of their time and energy to train the kid, to help the kid understand how to work, what the work ethic is. At the end of the day, for me, this is about a work ethic and giving kids an opportunity to put in place what they have actually learned in the school environment.
I have some more. In reference to the trauma informed training, I think that's good to give it with the companies that we're working with, but I think that's something that should be done with the students as well. That should be a tool that they're on with too and going into what they're going into. And my hope is if we are identifying jobs for the students and that we're saying we're doing, is that the goal, to my understanding, is long-term, this is job placement. So if we're connecting one of our students to a particular job that is somewhere in alignment with what their future goals of employment is. So I will hope if we're using them as interns, that they're actually learning a skill that when they, especially them being juniors and seniors, something that they can use and maybe become employed by that particular entity. So I think the follow-up piece is the most important piece, accountability, making sure that what's being presented is actually being done and we're doing the services for our youth that we're hoping that they get. My other question, or my question that I really have is, I keep saying we're saying CTE students. Not all of our students are CTE students, we know, and I don't know where I saw, but how are we actually tapping into the schools to assist the students?
We're going to schools every week and meeting with students and having them sign up and register.
So it's all of our high schools?
Oh, yes.
Okay, that's
One of
what I
us-
was- because-
Even Nottingham, so every one of our schools.
That's what I'm, so what we're dealing with is at first, by doing that, we didn't have the regular students.
Oh, we always had the regular schools.
We
I'm
had,
sorry.
I'm saying the numbers, we didn't have, like, we were basically saying, okay, we can take this to a further reach by engaging our CTE students as well.
No, we always had CTE
Was
students,
a part of it
but they were
always.
not going to get paid the same amount because they were already committed. That's
To the-
part of their,
Okay,
that's part of what
The
their,
program.
yes, part of their program.
okay.
And you framed something that I think is a good example here. We have a dire need for teachers in our community and quite frankly, across the country. We are placing some students who have actually indicated they want to be teachers or work in a school environment. So we're going to have some kids in our high schools and middle schools working in this particular program with the idea that they become interested in being a teacher and then moving them to Harris or other universities in that kind of a teacher program. So that is exactly what we're trying to do as we take surveys of students to find out what they might be interested in.
I just want to follow up with what Tony said is I want us to be careful to make sure we understand that a lot of these students won't leave with those employers with a true skill set because 3 months, maybe 6 months really isn't enough time, but they could go with knowledge whether or not this is what they really want to do.
Correct.
This is a good idea. One of our students, the CTE program, ended up coming to our job and actually got her degree, because I followed up with a couple of them, got her degree from Fontbonne in computer science. Another student is doing exactly what he wanted to do, and I keep up with him today. So I don't want us to set a goal that, oh, we're gonna leave these students with a real skill set. I mean, when we worked with launch code students, it took us 6 months to evaluate whether or not we would want to hire them. So if you have a high school student, a CTE student, you're probably not going to leave with a skill set to get a job, but maybe more information about whether or not they're going to pursue what they want, that interest, or encourage them to pursue that interest once the job program is done. So I just don't want to set our goals so high that it's unrealistic. So.
And Dr. Adams, just very briefly, you mentioned that this program would help us earn points.
Yes, ma'am,
Can you put that
possibly.
in context for the
So,
larger audience and for the board?
yeah, so as I indicated before, we are required, students graduate in June. We are required 180 days in January of the following year to say where students are. Meaning if they're in a 2-year college, a 4-year college, have a job, or in the military. If students are not engaged in those entities in a meaningful kind of way, then we get less APR points. We get up to 10 points, but we get less APR points for our accreditation. And so if some of these students remain in these jobs past the summer period of time, or get interested in jobs, or to Mrs. Fowler point, decide, I hate this job and I don't ever want to do it again. I need to go to college. That will motivate, that hopefully motivates a kid to say, I need to be doing something in 180 days. When we identify that kid, we know what that kid is and what that kid is doing. And so that's what I mean by APR points on the college and career piece. And I'll go over that at the next board meeting or the board meeting in January to walk the board through what that means, because we went over it today in a meeting that really showed exactly the impact of kids not being engaged in the light of this pandemic and how it will impact schools.
So Dr. Adams, can I ask, based on that and what our points or what have you, is that then the responsibility or where it comes in, where the college and career readiness program, we're kind of part of that follow-up?
Yes.
On that's the role
Oh, yeah.
that,
Oh, yes. Yeah.
that our
Yeah,
staff.
As a matter of fact, our counselors and Dr. Bender's behind me, we have paid for counselors. I don't think we did it last year because of the pandemic, to work throughout the summer to assist kids
Okay.
to get in college, to find out where they are. So we don't start looking for them in January. We look for them every single month.
Okay.
And so, Calvin, where are you? You're not in school? Tell me what's going on. What can we do to help you?
Okay.
That is a requirement that we put on ourselves to try to track down and support these kids, even when they graduate in June.
Thank you, Dr. Adams. We're going to move on to the December consent agenda. Are there any questions?
I see you have the legislative agenda. That's going to be separated from the other things. We'll discuss that separately.
I think y'all are actually voting on that. I'm sorry. I think y'all are actually voting on that tonight. It's on your agenda. Mr. Davis asked me to put on it, Madam President, and so you're actually voting on it tonight.
I guess I was talking about how it's set up on the thing. We're going to vote on that after we discuss the other items on the consent agenda. Okay, that's what I was asking. Okay. Only question I had about the consent agenda, Dr. Adams, is there are three, I think, items, 17, 18, and 21, that are being increased. Could you give me just a general idea why the increases? One is the renewal of the school management liability insurance. The other is the contingencies, why the contingencies are so large for some of these items for 17 and 18. You have a 20% contingency for Marsh, on the school management liability insurance, and then a fairly sizable, about 15% contingency for the all risk insurance policies.
Ms. Banks?
Every year when we go out for our various insurance coverages, we don't actually receive back the information probably until until May or June. Therefore, we put in the board resolutions way before then, so we have that large contingency so that we don't have to do an amendment, because generally most of those invoices are due in July.
So this doesn't necessarily represent an expectation that the cost will go up this much, but you're just making sure that we are voting on enough just in case of an increase.
Yes.
Okay, great, okay. And then the last question I have on 21 is that we are increasing that by 750,000. And again, if we could kind of give us an understanding of why the increase. So
Mr. Watson, you come forward. Basically, I provided the board with a presentation at the last couple of meetings that indicated air quality. This is a company that does the air quality work. And so they are the ones, and they, quite frankly, I'm adding it to the agenda to be voted on Tuesday, because through the winter break, we will have them in schools working when no kids are there. And so that is the reason why this is up. I actually have a chart that lays out what they'll be doing, and I can provide it to the board. But Mr. Watson and I have had detailed conversation about this. It is our intent to go out for bid the following year for this particular company. This company has done a great job for us, don't get me wrong. But at this point in time, because of the increase in the work that we're going to be needing around air quality, we couldn't do it right now to get work done now. But we will be putting this out for bid at the end of this school year.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. And I can provide the board with the list of the projects that they will be working on as early as during the winter break.
Thank you.
No, he doesn't need to say anything. Not personal, I mean, he and I have talked about this. I'm sorry. I don't.
Okay. Dr. Adams, I did submit some written questions around the agenda, and I'd like to have you respond to those and then send them to the board.
Yes, ma'am.
rather than to discuss.
Yeah, I apologize. I did get them on Friday and I didn't get a chance to complete all of them. I did work on a few of them, but I'll have your responses tomorrow.
Okay.
Thank you.
If there are no more questions on the consent agenda, we can move to Matt and the legislative slate platform.
So the document that we submitted is similar in content to a document that we approve every year, which is our legislative platform that Mr. Carroll, our lobbyist, and Dr. Adams generally prepare, and that the board approves, and that serves as a baseline for communications on various issues that come up through the legislative year. Because we have the legislative committee now, we started with the traditional platform and went through that and built our discussions on that in the context of legislation that happened last year and we anticipate happening this year. It looks very different thanks to Ms. Willis and her team. They formatted a little different to put a little more I always like bullets. So it's in certain categories that these were already there. So this is very similar, and I'll point out some changes. Our discussions in the legislative committee have centered around pulling out things that were already on the platform to identify 3 priorities. So our 2 of the priorities are under that first category of support. And so we'll be seeking support legislatively for services for our students around trauma and homelessness. And those are the 2 big picture requests that we have. And under the support are just generally some more detailed issues and how we can support that. The only thing I think that is new necessarily on here, fully new, actually I take that back. It's worded a little bit differently. I think it was on the previous one, is requesting a new category for weighted factors for transient students. And then we did actually, and factoring in the percentage of homeless students in equations regarding funding. Those are different from what was there before. And then we are actually requesting a specific line item around trauma. Going on to the next page, what is different from previous years, if you look under local control and support, plans calling for a pause for the opening of new schools in the city of St. Louis until a citywide plan for education can be developed. As you know, we've already requested a moratorium. The Board of Aldermen has passed a resolution supporting that. So the next step is to take it to Jefferson City. So if we approve this, this will be a request which our lobbyists and we can take directly to our legislators to introduce legislation around that part. And then finally, I just want to point out, which was an issue last year, will be an issue this year. Bills have already been pre-filed regarding this. On the last page under funding, the second bullet item is our 3rd priority, which is any new opposing any new additional funding sources for charter schools that would divert funding away from the St. Louis Public Schools. This is changing the local funding source to divert $17.5 million a year from our budget to charter schools. We oppose that. That's our 3rd legislative priority. And like I said, bills have already been filed that we would oppose based on adopting that. I've asked to take this off the consent agenda and vote on it tonight because we are having our legislative breakfast presentation to present our priorities. And then we would also like to present the platform on Saturday, this coming Saturday, the 11th at 9 o'clock at Carnahan. And I hope you'll all be there. So I'm happy to take any questions.
Matt, first I want to say to the legislative committee, they did a really great job. The presentation is just so much clearer, if I'm honest. I will say, I did text Matt and Dr. Roberts about this, and it was on the CRT, critical race theory, and the fact that our legislative platform does not address that at all. That really, it concerns me because that has become a national discussion. And I think when we talk about trauma for children of color, a lot of it comes from, racial disparities and institutional racism. And I think a district this large in our state, which is highly Republican, I think it's imperative that we state on our legislative platform if we oppose or support critical race theory. We received a legislative update from our lobbyist who said the state, of course, is addressing it as a discussion of history. He thinks that's what he's dealing with critical race theory. And I think it's important for us to take a stand on that subject because not understanding the history of this country and the impact that it has had on children of color, families of color, as well as families and people that are not in the minority. It's a huge impact. It affects how they think about themselves. It affects how how resources are distributed. And I think our district in Kansas City probably should state whether openly and I know we have a statement, but I think we should state it in our legislative platform, whether we support it or we don't support that. As our state representatives are talking about that, I think they should know what our stance is on that particular subject. And that was the only thing that I had a concern about on the platform. And and I think it should be part of our platform for 2022.
So I'm happy to address it, and I kind of exchanged some of our thoughts on the email. We did talk about this in the legislative committee very briefly. Mr. Carroll identified, like he has in our legislative update, what the big education issues were going to be, and this was before pre-filing bills. So, and feel free to jump in here, anybody was at the meeting, Dr. Adams, but my takeaway from that is that we have addressed it very generically in the local control issue, talking about local school district authority to make the decisions about matters including, and we have a list, and it includes curriculum and instruction materials, as well as professional development, because that becomes part of it as well. The problem, there was a couple problems because it's kind of a setup argument, and especially how it's been presented over the summer, and that was the context of when we were bringing it up. And if you look at the way the bill was worded last year, well, two things. First of all, the state's DESE sent out a survey to all of the schools. There were very few that said some didn't answer. We answered. The answer is no, we do not teach critical race theory. The other one was we do not teach the 1619 project. It's not part of our curriculum. Most schools in our metro area said they didn't do it. I think there was maybe one or two that may have something adjacent to it. There was one charter school, I think, that had something adjacent to it. And then there were a few in the state, very few, who said, yes, we actually are doing this. And I think at least one of those is being sued by the Attorney General. But our answer is no. So we're like, well, what are we opposing? Because we don't do it. You know, what is our statement? We've answered the statement. We haven't talked about it. Critical race theory is a law school class. We don't teach law school here. The 1619 project is a lovely piece. It's not something that we have time or room for, or has been a request, quite frankly, I think, in any of our schools. I mean, you know, we have a curriculum that we've done, and it's a myth. You know, these things are myths, and it's kind of a setup. And the problem is this, because if you look at the bill that was introduced last year, it was House Bill 1141, and it was amended. They go on to define critical race theory as things like basically anything that talks about educational equity, anything that talks about diversion and inclusion. You can read it in one way. If you're teaching about slavery, under this definition, you're teaching critical race theory. Well, we don't want to wade into that mess, because, you know, if this bill as worded would just be so fraught with problems, you know, for our teachers to teach things that everybody agrees that that's history, and that we have to talk about that. And so, you know, our point is this: let local control, like always, deal with the curriculum. I mean, I don't know about you guys. We have not gotten one pushback from a parent, from a teacher, anybody saying, are you teaching critical race theory? My experience as a parent is that most of our schools embrace teaching about educational equity. They embrace teaching about a wide pantheon of history, about people that were underrepresented, or the people that have been disenfranchised throughout history. I mean, that's my experience in this school district. I think that's why a lot of people enroll in this school district and appreciate that fact. So, I mean, that's the local control angle that I think we have, that we are not where other school districts are, where there's tension, where there's parents who are disagreeing about what should be taught in the schools on this issue. I don't see it. I don't foresee it. If anybody's going to make an issue, it's going to be people from outside of our city, outside of our community, that quite frankly should not have any say in what our curriculum is. So I guess our problem is with that, and this is a lot of my opinion, so I apologize, but I think that that was the issue, is like, we don't teach it, you know, so it doesn't exist. It's a myth.
Well, I think that's the issue. We don't teach it. And Matt, I think we sit at very different tables on this subject with city parents, and they don't think we have a good program that teaches our students about the history of the.
Wait, look, I think
that was my point, is that I think parents want more.
Right. And
they want more. And I think that this is an issue of people wanting less. And that's not our experience in this city, and that's not my experience as a parent.
And what I'm asking, okay, what I'm asking then is that we should state exactly what we want as what we support. If we have to say we support teaching of history as it actually happened, which includes a full deep dive into for slavery and the past and present impact of slavery on our institutions and our families and the trauma it presents, whatever. I think we have to make a strong statement on what it is. I don't think we have, I think to be silent, to say, well, we're not having issues. I think that's who you ask. Because when I sit down with families who are all African-American, who have students in the city, they think the city schools are lacking in that, in dealing with this subject. And I think maybe you only experience that if you are coming from that perspective. And so, which makes it even more important that it be taught so that more people can understand that perspective. And I think to leave out a stronger statement saying what we really want to see and what we do support is very important. And I can tell you the tables I sit at don't think the city schools are doing a good job. And when we went through and had the survey, and when we went through the survey, I made a comment. I am shocked that our district has not been a leader in having something more specific on the 1690 project, CRT. And so what you're referring to back in July, I made comments on it and was very concerned even then, so.
Can I add to that? To me, I think it's wording. From what I'm hearing and on both ends, basically the district on a local aspect has free range in how we can educate and bring more knowledge into the true history. And I think we're in the zone of the term, you know, the way they want to define what critical race theory is, the way the state is defining and making it as it's an ugly thing of critical race theory, the same way they make it an ugly thing of defunding the police, or you know, it's wording, and it's how we as a board, I agree with you, we should be making a statement, but I think our statement should be much stronger to say, because we have the decision as a district to say what can be and can't be taught or brought into the curriculum, then it's not necessarily focusing on the term critical race theory, but basically as a district to say, this is the stand that we will take in regard to educating the true history of what's going on.
I agree with you 100%, not using that term because we have made it evil. And I agree that we shouldn't use the term because I don't want it to be read as if it's something evil and it's not. I just want us to be clear that we support a full history, and I think we need to take time to really discuss how that wording is, so it's not unclear that, and it's not hidden in the history lessons. And I would say when I was in high school, and I know that was a very, very long time ago, but I remember a student challenging the history teacher that we should spend more time discussing slavery. Now, I wasn't that student, it was another student, and the history teacher just said, well, this is what the books have. Well, that's not appropriate anymore, that this is what the books have. We have to say, do more, because we know that we're using books that have already been published, and they're not focusing on the impact of our history. They're not focusing on the trauma it has created with our students and families. And I think this is the time in this day and time that we say something stronger and do it without saying CRT, do it without saying 1619, but we can do it and make a stronger statement and say that this is what we're for, so.
And let me recommend with those comments that we do have a deadline in front of us. And if Regina, you would be willing, along with Matt and Tony, to craft the language that we can approve and be ready to present on Saturday, I think that would put us in a good position.
Well, and if I can make another
And
suggestion.
I've been
Oh,
trying to
sorry,
talk for a
sorry.
while.
Sorry.
I was also gonna say, like, I think similar to what Tony said, like critical race theory is, like, I studied African-American studies in undergrad. It really is not something that most, even like the most racially focused, you can have a curriculum focused on race and usually K through 12, you don't call it critical race theory. Like the wording in the Missouri bill was pretty much just saying anything, if you want to talk about history and really any real honest way that deals with race, it's under this thing, and that's not even what critical race theory is. So I definitely think we should craft a statement. I think I kind of agree with Matt. I think the idea is that we don't you know, I think people already know because we're a majority Black district, because of our community, that we are, you know, someone we're comfortable talking about race. We talk about it all the time on the board, but I agree, like a statement just cementing that we agree, we are comfortable with teaching our students the truth, which includes the truths about our racial history. Like, I think that's good, but I also think maybe even addressing like, because that's part of what Missouri, you know, that's like a distraction. Critical race theory is not what we would be teaching. We would just be teaching kids their history. And I actually did email Dr. Adams around the time that survey came out, and I asked him, is there anywhere where we teach about race in our curriculum? And I think what I learned was that for English class, for juniors, they can take like the standard English, or they can do for African American studies class and get the same credit. So maybe as a board, you know, we can like talk about that, but I just want to make sure that why deal with a lawsuit because we use language that we don't even teach at this level.
So if I can make a suggestion, I appreciate this conversation, and I think we should have it, and I think we should have it more often. We should have it more specific about the curriculum, and I think our community would appreciate that. It's one of our transformational pillars about culturally appropriate, responsive education materials. So it is something that, you know, we probably don't talk enough, but it's all kind of around there. My suggestion would be, because we can't predict what the legislation is going to look like. I point out that bill because it's just a mess. Like, I mean, what they're saying is like, we don't know, teachers will be frozen with fear. They won't know what to say. You know, it's like the I gotta know, it's the opposite of the politically correct police, or it's a new version of politically correct police in our classrooms. I mean, there's even a bill to have cameras record teachers last year to see if they were talking about this. I mean, all of that is so much nonsense. We oppose it. We oppose it. We absolutely oppose it. We don't have to discuss it. We oppose it. I think every school district in Missouri opposes it. Every school district organization opposes it because it just doesn't make any sense. So I think that was the wording why we just kind of left it at, we support local control for decisions on our curriculum. And so my suggestion would be, because we'll be monitoring all of this and see what's serious and what isn't, where it's appropriate for us to weigh in, or, you know, sometimes this is just politicians grandstanding for a particular constituency and has no chance, like this bill ended up having no chance ever passing because every rural superintendent was calling their representative and saying, what are you doing to us? Because, you know, we're going to teach about slavery too, because it's in our history curriculum, and now we don't think we can do it. So, and I'm sorry, I don't mean to go on about this. My suggestion is, let's look for opportunities during the legislative session. If we want to revisit this from a legislative perspective, or producing a statement where we can have a more robust conversation, we can include educators and the curriculum specialists if that's necessary, to talk about, you know, how are they doing professional development around these issues? Where are they finding places for curriculum? In what grades? I mean, and things like that. So we have a more fuller understanding. And I mean, the point of the legislative committee during the session is to be nimble enough that if we do need to get together and craft statements targeted towards specific language in legislation where it requires us to do so, that we're going to address it at that time. Is that fair? Does that make sense? It's not fair.
No, it's not fair. It's not fair to African-American families who feel they've been left out and feel this board is leaving them out too, because we're drowning ourselves in generalities and not saying something more specific that we believe in this curriculum that supports it. I know every book teaches about slavery, but I minored in African American studies. It wasn't until I minored in African American studies that I even learned about our history. Our kids are not leaving, Black, white, Asian, or whatever race they are, whatever culture they are. They are not leaving their high school years understanding the impact of our country's sins, and they need to understand that. Why is there so much trauma in some of these neighborhoods? Well, when you don't have opportunities and you're not even taught the history of the housing, you know, how housing inequities in housing, inequities in schools, and inequities. One of the first African-American attorneys who became an attorney in the Missouri had to sit in the corner in a classroom, and how that passes on down generations. I think we have to be a little bit more open about what we have, what we believe in, because this is something that will be published. And I think our community has to know that we support it and we're not drowning this out in some generality. And I agree, let's not use CRT, but we need to craft some statement that's a little bit more specific than what we have here on that particular subject, because it is a hot issue. And people are talking about it, and people want to know what we're doing as a board about it. So
I think I'm loving it. And I'm thinking where on the legislative piece, where we come in and where we're able as the board to make those strong statements and be able to do is on the local piece. I think what you and Matt are kind of saying similar of the same thing, but it's making sure that we're showing our role as board members and what our expectation is for the district in educating all of our students on what's not necessarily in the book, like you're saying, because like you say, a lot of what's been put in the book is a lot of basic misinterpretation. But as board members, a statement that I agree we probably should be positioning ourselves to make is to say, this is what we're asking for. This is what we're requesting, not the CRT aspect of it, but ensuring that those holes in history are being presented within the district to our students.
but I'm also asking that when we talk to Carol and his team, that they are very clear that when they go before the state and legislators, he's clear on what it is we really want and what we really support. And I don't think this does it, so.
Then I'm coming back to my initial recommendation that
Right.
the three of you get together and craft something that we can live by as a board.
Okay.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Yeah.
So my issue then, just to be clear, because we wanted to have something that the board approved that we can distribute on the 11th, and my apologies, we didn't get this out sooner. It snuck up on me, this legislative session and the changes that we had to have it presented.
Well, I think we vote on it with the addendum that later we'll add something on
Thank
that.
you.
So
That's what I'd like.
I can vote on it with that addendum, so, yeah.
That's wonderful. Well, do you want to make a motion?
I make a motion that we accept the legislative platform for 2022 with the addendum that we will insert a statement on our stand for a broader dive into history that will be added at a later time.
Second.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler,
Yes.
Ms. Vowell, Mr. Davis,
Yes.
Dr. Roberts.
Yes.
Motion passed.
And just to clarify, we don't have to do this by Saturday, right? We could do this after Saturday. Okay.
No, we got what we need for Saturday, but we have some homework. Ms. Cousins, Ms. Fowler, and back. We got some homework. Okay. I'd like to get a motion in a second.
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ms. Sonier,
Yes.
Ms. Cousins.
Yes.
Ms. Fowler.
Yes.
Mr. Davis.